Are you thinking about starting a podcast? If so, I have a few tips that may be helpful for you. My name's Yolanda Postel, and I have a podcast called Purposeful Woman. I've actually had this podcast now for over 2 years, but the topic of my podcast is all about helping women step out on faith and be the amazing woman God has called them to be. And if you haven't subscribed to Purposeful Woman, now's the time. However, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I would say the first thing to consider is, what is your message going to be? What is the overall theme of your podcast? It's important to keep this in mind because it's going to be the foundation of every message that you talk about on your podcast. And you want to try to be specific about what that is and not be all over the place, because it helps your audience know that they can count on you to stay in a particular vein. And it doesn't mean that you can't change, but it is important to give your audience that consistency that they are used to. And number two, who is your primary audience? Who's that going to be? Is it going to be men? Is it going to be women? Is it going to be entrepreneurs? Is it going to be high school students, college students? Who is your message going to be for? Because that is also important to make sure that you're speaking to the appropriate age group, your topics are on point, and that way you have a target audience. Because I know sometimes there are certain topics that can apply to anybody. However, it's really good to think about who that person is that you have in mind that you're speaking to. Their age group is important. Where they are in life is important. Because how many of you know that, of course, where you are in life depends, the experiences you have depend on where you are in life. And the experiences of a 40-plus-year-old are not going to be the same as a 20-something. So it's a great idea to really target and hone in who your audience is. If you're talking to business professionals, then you have the appropriate topics for them. But that is definitely the core foundation. And go a little deeper. What, besides the age and besides the identity of this person, what else is it about them? What are their concerns? What are they looking for? What do you think they value? So it's important to do a very in-depth study of this person that you are reaching out to. And lots of times it's going to be the things that you're interested in, the age group you're interested in, or whatever. But sometimes it may gear or go outside of that. But it's definitely important just to have that person in mind that will be the receiver of your message. And number three is, now that you know what your topic is, now that you know who you're speaking to, then you also have to look into, okay, what podcast platform are you going to use? For me, I use Podbean. I'm sure there are a million others out there. I was part of a coaching group, and what I had to do is just ask around, because there were several podcasters in the group. I was able to find out what platforms they were using to record or to release their podcast, and then I made up my mind which one I wanted to use based off that. I know for a while some of them were using Anchor. This was a few years ago. I don't even know if that's still around, but of course, again, I use Podbean, and I do not, as of now, I do not record my podcast directly into Podbean. I can, but I have not done so yet. I probably will give it a shot. But right now, I just record my podcast on my phone. And so that gets into the other part, is the equipment. Right now, I record my podcast on my phone, and I have an MV88 microphone that I use, and I plug that into my phone. It's very easy. I saw someone that recommended it online, and so I went and I purchased a microphone. I will go ahead and put the cost up for you, but it was very easy to use, and it is not a problem at all. It comes with a little what they call a dead cat. So if you're outside and you're recording and it's a windy day, then that wind won't get in the way of your recording. So you don't have to go out and purchase all of this expensive equipment, because I think that was something that really made me nervous when I thought about starting my podcast. I thought I had to invest all of this money into equipment. Thank God I didn't. And again, the best thing to start with is your phone. It's the same thing if you're starting a YouTube channel. You use what you have. You don't have to go out and buy all this expensive stuff. And by the way, I am not an affiliate. I'm not getting paid for anything I'm talking about. These are just things I've began to use and learn through, trial and error and trying different things out. But the one staple has always been my telephone. And you can, as far as what you use to edit your software, I know that some people use GarageBand. I use a different type of software to edit my podcast, but what you choose to use to edit, it's up to you, and there is no right or wrong. And I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on on the software I use to edit my podcast. I'll put it up for you. But there was a learning curve as far as me learning to use it. I actually went to YouTube University, and just Googled some videos, learned how to use the software, and that's what I use to edit my podcast. Has everything been perfect? No. Have I made some mistakes? Yes. Has my audio had times where it sucked? Absolutely. But you also have the choice to go ahead and send it off and have it edited. But of course, having your podcast edited each week can be costly, because a lot of the podcast editors, they charge by, is it a 10-minute podcast, a 20-minute, 30-minute, it's an hour long. So if there are some things you can do to learn and edit it yourself, then that would definitely help. But if you choose to send your podcast out, you can go to Fiverr to find someone that can edit it for you. If you have someone that that edits podcasts, then that's great. You can use whoever you know, but it is time consuming. It's not something that that you can do in 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, me personally, I take my time. There have been times where I've done it when I was tired and left something in there that I wasn't supposed to or meant to take out. But we're human, things happen. And just find the thing that's best for you. I'm not sure for those systems where it allows you to record your podcast directly in it, how that editing works. But I would just say learn as much as you can about it, and just try it on your own, because again, it does get costly trying to send your podcast out all the time to be edited. So as much as you can learn on your own, the better it is. Next is, what are the places where you're planning on releasing your podcast? Mine currently, it's Purposeful Woman is on Google, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can go to Podbean and pull it up. And I think it may be on a few others. I didn't try to put it on every platform out there because I'm doing it myself. And so I'm trying to do the least amount of work that I have and that I have to do. So I just picked the handful that I know a lot of people really pull the information from and just went with that. And when you have all of these things in mind already, keep in mind that there is a monthly cost for some of the platforms that you use. I know with Podbean, I believe I pay $14.99 a month for my podcast hosting, and they do give you a little website where you can upload your picture, put a little blurb about your podcast. So be sure to have a description of what your podcast is. Be sure to have a nice photo of yourself. If you can't go out and get a professional headshot, which we know not everybody can do, then just go ahead and get a nice photo. And when it comes to your podcast cover, I know that there are some people that do it themselves. Me personally, I went to Fiverr, got my podcast cover done. I didn't pay more than $10. And I know a few other podcasters who went and got theirs done, found somebody on Fiverr, paid $10, and boom, there's your podcast cover. So it's not as difficult as you think it may be. I think the main thing that's intimidating to everybody is that darn equipment. But it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be something that's reasonable and easy and simple to use. If you're doing once you have everything going and you have your audience, you have your message, you've decided on your platform that you're going to use, you've got everything set up, you got your podcast cover that you're going to upload to all of the different sites, then it's time to just record. And I know some people that they started on the podcast journey. I was told that the average statistic, which I will look it up, but I was told that most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. And I think that's because when you start your podcast, it may feel a little unusual because you're not talking to somebody that's in front of you. You are just talking in this room to yourself, imagining the audience that you're talking to, and there's nobody there. Some people, they find that when they start the process of their podcast, they don't like it, and so they don't continue. I feel that for me, when I started, it felt a little strange. I'm not going to lie. It felt a little strange. I had to get used to talking into the air, into my phone, and I wasn't quite comfortable at first. I think it probably comes through in some of my earlier episodes, but the more I kept at it, the more comfortable I got. But for me, I was determined that, hey, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to stop doing this podcast. I believe that this is something that God wants me to do, and I'm going to continue to do it until He tells me to stop. So I just keep going. I keep going. And of course, after a couple of years, I'm more comfortable now. Everything isn't perfect, but there are some days where I'm tired, and I've gone back and I've listened to other podcasts that I've done, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can tell I'm tired on that day. So another tip for you is just try to, record on a day where you're feeling good, you have the energy. Try not to do it last minute if you can. And that way you give yourself some room. You're not up late trying to edit and throw it together last minute. You have some time, and you can just make sure it's done right. And I think that was one of the most important things, is really making sure that I go ahead and get these recordings done at a time where I am most alert, most energetic, because how you're feeling, whether you're energetic or tired, whether you're sad, whether you're happy, it really does come through on the podcast. So it is good to make sure that you're in that good state of mind, and that you're in that right attitude when you record your podcast. And the last tip I want to leave you with is, it is okay to pivot. When I started my podcast at first, it was all about helping women in their relationships. But as I got a few episodes in, I just knew in my heart that that was not the message. And so I had to just tweak my topics a little bit. And, relationships were no longer my focus. So if you start your podcast and you begin to realize that you need to change your topic, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Just go ahead, pivot, tweak your message, and give your audience a heads up. Because I know for me, I had recorded an episode and just let the audience know, hey, I know that I was talking about relationships before, but I felt in my heart that, God is leading me in a different direction, and so I need to be obedient to that. And so this is what my message is going to be now. It's okay to change. What are they going to do? Really, what are they going to do? Nothing. And just get out there and record it. And if I can end this on any note, is be yourself and don't worry about what other people have to say. And the reason why I say that is because I had a couple of people tell me, oh, well, how can don't you need to have this type of paperwork first before before you can start talking about a particular topic? No, I don't. Why don't you talk like this? And you need to say your words like that. And all of this quote unquote advice. But here's the problem. You trying to conform to what other people think you should sound like, talk like, how you should say your words. Anything as far as changing who you are, throw that out the window. Because if you are trying to be like somebody else, talk like somebody else, say your words like somebody else, it is going to come through on that podcast. It is not going to be authentic, and your audience is going to feel it. So push through. Even be yourself. Even if you feel a little bit uncomfortable at first, be yourself, because you want to put your true self out there. You don't want to have to turn around later on and people wonder, well, who is this person? They were one way earlier, now they're this way, and now they're that way, because you're all over the place trying to meet everybody's expectations and trying to change yourself or your message to fit this particular mold. Listen, there's somebody out there that wants to hear what you have to say the way that you need to say it, and the way you say it, you're designed to say it in a way that this particular group of people are going to receive. So be yourself. And if starting a podcast, again, if that is something that you want to do or pursue, give it a try, give it a shot. You won't know that you can do it until you do. And I tell you, at the beginning of 2021, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what else do I want to do? A podcast was nowhere on my mind at all. However, God dropped in my spirit the name of the podcast, and I just moved forward with it. And again, it was just, I felt like this little child trying to get their legs under them, trying to figure things out. But I did it. Eventually, I got it done. Now, like I said, it's been over 2 years that I started the podcast. So if I can do it, and let me tell you, I am not a techie. I'm not a tech whiz. I'm not a tech genius. I'm just an average person. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. And maybe after starting your podcast, you feel that podcasting, if it's for you, you stick with it, you keep going, and then eventually you'll get to the point where you could celebrate 1,000 downloads, 2,000 downloads, and give yourself a pat on the back. Or you may say, you know what, I think I want to do something else. Some people I know went from podcasting and they decided that they wanted to do Facebook Lives or IG Lives instead. Or you may be like me and you have a podcast and you decide you want to do a YouTube channel too. Really, it's endless. There's Nothing's stopping you. There's nobody stopping you. As somebody said, the gatekeepers have been removed. Before, maybe 15 years ago, people had all these hurdles that they had to overcome to be able to just get something online. But now we have no excuse. We have all the tools at our fingertips, all the information at our fingertips, all the technology at our fingertips. So there really is no reason to delay starting. So if you want to start that podcast, get it going. Get it started, because I know that they said podcasting is supposed to grow tremendously in the next few years. So now's your time to jump in, get your feet wet, learn it, and become that expert and be comfortable in it and be part of that growing trajectory that they expect podcasts to be. And you have nothing to lose. So I just want to encourage you, start on your podcast today. Don't delay. And in case you have not subscribed, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button so that the algorithm will know that it's good content. And I will see you again next time. And if you plan on starting a podcast, just make a comment. I'd love to know how many of you really are thinking about starting one. So I'll see you next time.